Hi, thanks for joining this workshop on the Complex Fractures Priority Setting Partnership, or PSP. I'm Chris Bretherton. I'm a trauma surgery registrar and the PSP coordinator. I'm going to tell you about the background to the project and a bit about what we've done so far. There's another video from Jonathan Gower, who's our JLA advisor, that explains what will happen on the day and any preparation that you need to do in advance for it. So the AOUK and Orthopedic Trauma Society are organizations that promote research and care for patients with fractures. Previously, most research studies have been focused on simple or more common fractures, such as hip or wrist fractures. Now, those are ones that normally just require one form of treatment, and relatively speaking, their recovery is more predictable. Complex fractures, however, often require multiple treatments over a prolonged period of time and require the coordinations of multiple healthcare professionals and teams. Examples include open fractures coming through the skin, multiple fractures, fractures around the pelvis or acetabulum or hip socket, and fractures involving a joint that's broken into multiple pieces. Now, these fractures are less common, and that makes them harder to do research on and harder to design studies around. Yet now, with an increase in global networks to deliver these research projects, AOUK and the Orthopedic Trauma Society believe that now is the time to establish research priorities, because while these fractures are less common, as many of you will know, they can be life-changing injuries, and the challenges in recovery and care can be immense. So, why the JLA? That's because they are an independent organization, and the James Lind Alliance adheres to principles of transparency and patient voice. Now, what that means is that rather than charities or the NHS funding research that is just based on the ideas of one or two surgeons or professors, what this process ensures that the full scope of patients affected by complex fractures and those that care for them get an input and get a say into what needs to be researched over the coming decade. The first thing that we did is that we set up a steering group, and that includes patients with experience of complex fractures, as well as healthcare professionals from trauma orthopedic surgery, plastic surgery, physiotherapy, psychology, as well as doctors that care for older persons. And you can see here's a picture of our first and only face-to-face meeting for obvious reasons, and that was back in 2019 in October. The first thing that we did is we decided on the scope of the PSP. Partly we looked at what previous studies had done to make sure there wasn't too much overlap, but we also looked at NICE, or the National Institute for Clinical and Health Excellence, as they've produced guidance and definitions of complex fractures. Again, mostly open fractures coming through the skin, multiple fractures, fractures around the pelvis or hip socket, or fractures around a joint that's in multiple pieces. But again, it could be other forms, such as ones with nerve injuries or vessel injuries, really anything where the delivery and coordination of care is especially challenging. And so we're focused around care in the first 12 months following the injury. We're looking both at surgical and non-surgical care. We're looking at rehabilitation, both physical and psychological, occupational therapy and return to work, as well as service design and delivery. We do have some exclusions, and those include fractures in children because they heal and are often treated in different ways. We're not looking at the emergency department or pre-hospital care, partly because that will be the focus of another project that I might tell you about on the day. And we're not looking at isolated hand injuries, again, because that's been answered by a previous study. So what we did is we came up with an initial survey, and that was launched at the Orthopedic Trauma Society conference in January 2020. And we asked people to tell us about their research priorities. We gave them free text responses, but we prompted to split their answers into these sections. So there was the in-hospital treatment, which involves treatment of bones, wounds, and medicines. There's rehabilitation, both mental and physical. There was return to function, such as to work, driving, or hobbies, and then anything else, which included any experiences or stories that they wanted to share with us. So we advertised the survey on social media through patient societies, as well as hospital wards and clinics. And overall, after about 6 months, we received 535 responses from 158 individuals, of which 33 were patients and 125 were healthcare professionals. We grouped those 535 responses into 58 summary questions that were sort of a similar theme. And then we researched the literature just to see if they'd already been answered, because we don't want to spend time and funding in doing research that's already been done. But none of the questions had been answered that we'd created. The next phase was to come up with the interim survey, and that's where we asked people to pick their top 10 from the 58 summary questions that we'd formed and created and discussed as a steering group. We use the same methods through media and in-hospital surveys. Overall, we've got 136 responses, of which 56 were from patients and 80 were from healthcare professionals. We then processed the responses, but as you'll see, because there were more healthcare professionals than patients, we made a way of balancing and adjusting for this so that they each had an equal say. And so we had one top 10 ranking for patients and their carers and another for healthcare professionals. We then merged those to come up with 18 questions that was reflective of both groups in a balanced way. And those are the ones that we will be discussing in the workshop on June the 8th. This is a map of all the surveys, the people that responded either to one or both surveys, and we monitored this throughout the process to make sure we were getting a good spread of opinions from people from all around the UK. So the final workshop, as I mentioned, Jonathan has prepared a video that you may have already watched about what will happen on the day. But broadly speaking, we are going to work together to produce a top 10 list that we will then give to research funders and will inform future research. And what that is going to do, that is going to mean that research in the future is going to be based around what patients and healthcare professionals think is most important and is going to have the greatest impact on improving patients' lives after complex fractures. And so I'd just like to say at the end, thank you very much for agreeing to take part. And I look forward to seeing you and meeting you all on June the 8th. Thank you.